Hey everyone and welcome. Today we are going to jump into the incredible story of how medicine has learned to tame the electrical storms inside our own brains. We're talking about the evolution of anti-seizure drugs, and it's a journey that takes us from, well, blunt instruments all the way to precision tools.
So, first things first, what exactly is a seizure? Well, try to imagine your brain as this perfectly tuned orchestra, right? All the electrical signals are playing in perfect harmony. But then, out of nowhere, bam, a lightning bolt hits the stage. You get this sudden, chaotic, overwhelming surge of electricity. That's a seizure. It's just an uncontrolled, super synchronized firing of your brain cells. And the whole challenge is, how do you calm that storm and get the music playing again?
You know, at the very heart of this electrical balancing act are two main characters, glutamate and GABA. The easiest way to think about it is that glutamate is the brain's accelerator. It's the go signal. And GABA? Well, that's the brake pedal, the stop signal. So at its core, epilepsy is often just a simple imbalance. You either have way too much go from glutamate or you just don't have enough stop coming from GABA. The very first medicines had to figure out how to tackle this really fundamental problem.
And that brings us right to our first section, the earliest drugs. Now, these were the pioneers, the first real attempts to get seizures under control. And, like a lot of first attempts, they were basically a form of blunt force. I mean, they were powerful, and they definitely worked for some people, but they weren't exactly precise.
A perfect example of this is a drug called carbamazepine. You might know it as Tegretol. When it first came out, it was an absolute game changer. It was this heavy-duty tool that could literally stop a seizure in its tracks by blocking the brain's electrical pathways. But all that power came with some really significant complications.
Okay, so let's dig into this a bit, because how the body handles this drug is the key to understanding all its problems. When you take carbamazepine, your body uses an enzyme called CYP3A4 to break it down. But take a look at step 3. In the middle of that process, it creates this thing called an epoxide metabolite. And this little molecule isn't just active, it's also toxic. Your body then has to scramble, use another enzyme just to clean up the mess and make it safe. This extra, toxic step, yeah, that's where the trouble starts.
And believe me, that trouble shows up as some serious collateral damage. Because carbamazepine messes with that key enzyme, it interacts with a ton of other drugs. It can even make things like oral contraceptives less effective. It's so powerful it even speeds up its own breakdown over time, which makes finding the right dose an absolute nightmare. And the most serious part, it comes with box warnings. That's the FDA's highest possible alert for risks of deadly skin reactions and severe blood disorders. This was the price you paid for that blunt force power.
But scientists, of course, knew there had to be a better way, which leads us to the next generation of drugs. The goal here wasn't to totally reinvent the wheel, but to refine it, to create a new set of tools with a much, much finer touch. And this table right here, this is where it gets really cool. It perfectly shows the step-by-step evolution within a single family of drugs. You can see how chemists literally tweak the molecule to solve each problem. With oxcarbazepine, the second-gen drug, they cleverly redesigned it to completely bypass that problematic enzyme pathway. And the result? Look at that, no toxic metabolite. Boom. That immediately meant fewer side effects and fewer dangerous drug interactions. Then came the third generation, eslicarbazepine, which perfected the whole thing. It's a prodrug that activates in the cleanest, simplest way possible, which eventually made it possible to just take it once a day.
So what does all this elegant science actually mean? Well, it's not just about chemistry on a whiteboard. All of this progress translates directly into a better, safer experience for the patient. We're talking fewer side effects, way less risk, and a simpler daily routine. It all adds up to a much higher quality of life for people who are managing epilepsy. But hold on, there is one more piece to this puzzle. And honestly, it's a twist that changes absolutely everything. Because it turns out, the drug isn't the only variable in the equation. The most important factor might actually be you, and your own personal genetic blueprint.
I mean, this was the question that haunted doctors for decades. Why did that old drug, carbamazepine, work perfectly fine for millions of people, but in a small number of patients it would trigger this catastrophic, life-threatening reaction? The answer wasn't in the pill bottle. It was hidden in our DNA.
So a scientist eventually tracked down the culprit, a specific genetic marker called HLA-B1502. Think of your HLA system as the machine that prints the security ID cards for every cell in your body. It's how your immune system scans everything and decides friend or foe. Well, this particular genetic variant, it just prints a slightly different ID card.
Now here's where it gets really wild. This genetic variant isn't spread out evenly across the globe, not even close. As you can see from this chart, it's incredibly rare in people with European ancestry, but you can find it in up to 15% of people in some East Asian populations. It's also pretty common in people of Han Chinese and South Asian descent.
And that discovery led directly to this, an official FDA contraindication. What that means is, for people who carry this specific HLA-B1502 gene, their immune system sees carbamazepine not as medicine, but as a dangerous threat. This can trigger something called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, or SJS, which is basically a horrific, life-threatening allergic reaction where the skin can literally blister and peel off. For these patients, this drug isn't just a bad idea, it is strictly forbidden.
And this is the amazing part, where the story really comes full circle. We now have the power to prevent this from ever happening. A simple, one-time genetic test can tell a doctor if carbamazepine is a safe choice, or if it's a potential time bomb for their patient. We can literally read the patient's personal drug blueprint before we ever even think about writing the prescription.
So this entire journey, from a blunt force drug to this incredibly precise genetic approach, it leaves us with a really big question for the future, doesn't it? As medicine gets more and more personal, you have to wonder, will a map of your genes one day be just as important, or maybe even more important, than a list of your symptoms?